Okay. Well, what a great crew. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So you should be seeing my screen with our title slide and the faces of our wonderful panelists who are joining us for today. I'm excited to talk about this world that has turned on its head a little bit with the virtual remote world, which is social cohorts. In our session today, Beyond One and Done, 3 views on sustaining learning through social cohorts and communities. And again, I'll introduce all 3 of our panelists here. I'm very excited to have them on the phone with me today. But before we do that, please let's do some table setting because we want your interaction in the session today. We hope to have many questions from you all. And again, this is talking about perspectives. And so we hope to learn just as much from you as we are going to be talking about ourselves. So please make yourself familiar with the Q&A tab below and also reach out to our support staff if you have any technical questions that we can answer through the chat functionality. We will also be doing a poll, so that will pop up automatically on your screen, and we will carry through that when we get to that point in our presentation. So, and again, this is just a reminder here that we will also send out the handouts, including the presentation. You'll get the recording within 24 hours to answer that age-old question on any webinar: is this recorded and will this be distributed? The answer is absolutely yes, and we will send that to you. So with that, again, thank you so much for attending. We are very excited to have you today. My name is Ike Benyon. I will be your moderator. I have a background in history and human capital management, especially learning. So I'm very excited to learn a lot more today from all of you, as well as our panelists. And so our agenda will be pretty simple, but hopefully very effective. We will do an introduction to the topic with all of our panelists in that panel discussion. And then finally, we'll go to open Q&A. We've got some teed up questions based on what the panel has submitted as part of their table setting themselves. And then we will incorporate questions as we get them from you. So again, please answer your questions. We want to hear about how you're thinking about things and challenges that you may be experiencing as you're doing social cohorts today. So let's open it up so you get to hear and see from these wonderful panelists that we have today. So let's start, of course, as we are here on the slide from the left going to the right. Brandy, do you want to unmute yourself and take a moment to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandy Hightower, Director of Learning Ops and Tech at GP Strategies, consulting for automotive clients today, and 20 plus years experience in L&D. Hello, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Jim.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Ike. My name is Jim Batts, and I'm the Director of Learning Development for a company called Cornerstone On Demand. So I'm excited for today's session. The topic is near and dear to my heart, so looking forward to it.
And with Cornerstone, you know a thing or two about learning too, so that helps. Wonderful. And then over to Tony, Dr. Tony Bolden.
Hey, Ike, everybody, Tony Bolden here. I sit in 2 worlds. I'll get into that more a little bit later. But for the purposes of this conversation, we'll talk from, I'm the principal of Tony Bolden Enterprises, which is a advisory firm around leadership development and some other things. Wrote a book about it and all that stuff. We'll get into it later, but great to be with you all this afternoon.
Again, you know a thing or two that might be able to help us out today. So thank you.
Little bit.
Wonderful, wonderful. So glad to have all 3 of you with us today. So let's turn to an audience poll. I always think it's, of course, important in talking about learning to consider who you're talking to. So let's start with one. So what is your familiarity with virtual social cohorts, what you're doing in your organization today? For your first option, are you currently using virtual social cohorts? Are you feeling pretty good about them? Number 2, are you using in-person social cohorts but haven't tried virtual yet? You're thinking about how to make that transition? Or option 3, you're generally trying to figure out or improve your social cohort program across the board. And then lastly, are you just taking your baby steps? Are you just starting out? So review I got ahead of myself a little bit. The poll should have just popped up for you. So if you don't have that, please ping in the chat, but all of you should have seen that pop up. Take a moment, and I am very excited to hear about where everyone is. I can't vote though, unfortunately. Cool. So again, we'll close this down in about 15 seconds here. All right, let's see what we have so far. Wonderful. So hopefully you can see. If not, can you see the results here? If not, I'll just read them out to you. So we have about 24% using virtual social cohorts, which is our top, tied with looking to improve social cohort programs. So it looks like we have a lot of people who are, like everyone on the panel here, have some great experience that we're going to learn from as well today. And then, oh, excuse me, overwhelmingly, people are just starting to figure out about social cohort-based learning. So great, we'll have lots of things to talk about today, followed by those folks who already have some experience, excuse me, in prioritizing here. And then finally, we have some that are just trying to transfer over to virtual. So a lot of great experience on the phone today with us already, and excited to hear your questions about what's going on the ground with you as you're thinking about cohorts. So with that, let me just start by answering the question of why. I think we all assume why, we know why, but let's say it out loud. So we're here to talk about these small groups that usually engage in some program of learning together. And it's often the hope that these cohorts will continue to learn together. They'll continue to drive these conversations, learnings, and application in someone's day-to-day job. And ultimately, there's some common arguments of why use cohorts. So let's review those just for a moment. So the first, over there on the left, is to help users to remain accountable and to keep them on track with milestones for any learning that is planned within an organization. And for individuals too, of course, one of the key principles of accountability and changing habits and meeting goals is to simply vocalize what is going on and what someone wants to get from a program, or what they even want long term. And so this group can help to increase the felt levels of accountability for themselves, and also to help contribute that to the group. Second, the very nature of putting people in a room to solve problems together, to ideate, to collaborate, not only teaches the things that you hope for maybe in your explicit learning objectives, but it also helps to reinforce core skills. They have to negotiate, they have to articulate complex ideas, these things that are really critical to unlocking some of the effectiveness of technical skills that sometimes are lacking in important parts of the organization. And third, foster unplanned learning. Learning, I think, is best when there's a little bit of wiggle room. It's not a direct line. Sometimes it has false starts and stops. And people who have a broader perspective and view can help to connect people to other resources, to people, to advice, to more advanced pathways of learning. And then finally, that drive collaboration, I think, is the most well understood of social cohorts, is that there's really an opportunity to see how different people think, how they approach problems, and how to bring that back into somebody's day-to-day work. And cohorts have been especially common in academia. And, there's some powerful results that have happened. One study that I thought was particularly impactful to highlight is in postdoctorate and advanced doctorate PhD students, when they were incorporated into groups of junior PhD lab students, and all they did was just talk in that group about what was going on. There was a 4 times improved growth in skills without any establishment of roles. You didn't have to tell these senior groups that they were, trying to mentor or teach. They just said, hey, come join this conversation. And there was substantial growth that happened just by having that additional perspective in there. But bringing this over into the corporate world, of course, has some thoughtful exercises that have to happen to make it effective, some that I've represented here. How do you articulate the same milestones? What's the heartbeat and rhythm of these types of things? What are the ways that you help to prompt good emotional hygiene so that issues in the group are coming out on top? All of these things and more, which we'll dig into a little bit today. So with that, I'll stop talking. We'll turn it over to our first panelist, who I'm excited to hear from. Brandy, take it away, and feel free to bludgeon me if I need to advance the slide for you.
For sure. Thank you, Ike. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to be here today. My topic is learning is social. We did a little bit of a brief intro, but again, just more info for you. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I'm right in the middle right there. I'm a Zennial. I'm X and Zennial together. I know what a payphone is. I owned a beeper. I even remember all the faces of Michael Jackson. I have a TikTok account, and therefore I think I must be protected at all costs. I'm just saying. I have over 20 years experience, like I mentioned, and I have an amazing role right now as the Director of Learning Operations and Technology at GP Strategies. I'm supporting a client that's always looking for what's next and best for learners. And to do that, I always start with the end in mind. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. But let's dig into a little bit more around social learning. Why is connection important? How is humanity using tech to enable connections? What's the significance of it? How is it being done well? And what's next? Those are some of the questions I'm going to answer for you today. And then most of all, we're going to talk a little bit about that magic, the magic you can create using social learning cohorts. When we think about how learning is social, I just want to go over some background information specific to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, social learning theory, some benefits, and tech as an enabler, and then what's next. So let's get into it. COVID, it's our favorite topic, right? So I want to look at our stats around COVID and give you some insight. So collaboration and communication, along with loneliness, were the biggest struggles moving to remote life and learning. And as I was prepping for today, I asked my son, who is now a junior in high school, 9th grade was when COVID started. And I said, what is the worst thing that happened to you during COVID? And he said, all my connections were broken. I don't get to talk to people that I used to talk to. And second on his list was having to do his online learning alone. From the mouth of our future workforce. In 4 years, he'll be applying at a corporation, one of your corporations, and he'll be expecting certain things. We have a once in a generation opportunity right now to face a distinct change in how we communicate with our learners. This brief moment in time to use our themes and reimagine what learning is. We need to rethink and redesign purpose-driven, hard-leg, and future-centered learning. And it's all built around the basics, which is our human needs, which is our, I hope you're there, Ike, as on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow believed a person's needs are dealt with as a hierarchy, and that a person can't strive or think about growth needs before lower needs are satisfied. And in this conversation, we'll focus on how to satisfy those needs through our social learning cohorts. So in order to get that special magic, you have to exercise empathy. You have to meet learners where they are and use design thinking principles in order to get there so you can impact their motivation. We have to pause and reflect and consider which basic needs are affecting our learners. And we need to adapt to those different needs and create environments that speak to them. So on the next slide, I ask a simple question. What did people do when they hit a roadblock at work before COVID? And I had a different image before of someone peeking over a cubicle, but I couldn't resist using this fun guy from Office Space. But they get social. We're social human beings. We leaned over and we talked to our buddies and we figured things out. And next, we're going to talk about the top 3 tips to keep driving that further, to keep driving that desire further, to find the magic of social learning with a splash of design thinking, using empathy as our base and Maslow's hierarchy of needs to drive us there. So tip 1, provide social learning opportunities. That hits at that belonging piece of what it means to be a human. That is that cohort-based social learning. Create opportunities for learners to collaborate and compete with each other. People love a good competition. Utilize features like social streams, video chat technology with breakouts, forums, and discussion boards to get them going. And then the next step, taking it a step further, is using and adding gamification components as well as virtual rewards. This hits that esteem area of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Game mechanics like badging, experience points, levels, leaderboards are all powerful motivational tools to get learners excited. It gives them a sense of achievement. It's fun, and it encourages repeat visits. And as a result, you have this improved knowledge retention. And lastly, we dig into this idea of purpose, finding that epic meaning, that self-growth, that piece of the hierarchy in humanity that we need to function is finding our purpose. And that's what working in a social environment can do. We'll look at the Banduro's elements of social learning theory, and it just speaks to specifically the fact that humans learn from observing and imitating behavior modeled by others. And this could be in video games, social learning like cohort classrooms, gamified experiences, and communities of practice, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But what is social learning theory? It's the idea of attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. And the key word is motivation. We have to keep our learners motivated. And in order to do that, the learning has to tie into their social desires. So we've talked about Maslow, we talked about Bandura. How do humans learn? They learn by watching and reading to gain knowledge. They learn by listening and storytelling to acquire perspective. They learn by trying and failing and understanding pitfalls. And then they learn by practicing and doing and developing that competence. So in order to appeal to how our humans, our learners learn, we have to be aware of their needs of being wanted, being supported, and being prepared to thrive. We need to create those conditions because our learners are actually our teachers. So next, we're going to dig into this positive correlation between students' sense of community and their learning success in online courses. And I love numbers and stats. So we'll look at the remember curve next for social learning when we're looking at our stats. So passive learning actually only gets learners so far, meaning you sit them there in front of a desk and you expect them to learn. 72% of people forget what they've learned when they had to do it themselves. In social learning, meaning using it, answering questions, and interacting, you get a 69% remembering curve. People are remembering things because they're using it, answering questions, interacting. And then that learning completion rate. So we're looking at people who are presented with training, and those who are given a self-paced course with no additional insight, 3% completion rate, whereas cohort-based courses have over a 90% completion rate. 3 more big stats onto the next slide. 50% higher productivity, 40% less burnout, 76% more engagement. And studies have found that lack of social interaction to be the largest single barrier to student success online. And that's literally what my son said to me out of the mouth of babes, my 17-year-old. So next slide, the key to enhancing human interaction with technology is remembering that technology should never replace the human element. No matter how smart your bots are, no matter how smart your AI technology is, and no matter how cool your avatar looks like you, it will never replace you. It'll never replace the sincerity and power of your peers, coaches, and trainers interacting with learners. So there's your magic, our humanity. There's a few tools on the next slide that'll get you there. When you think about cohort-based learning, classes listed there as well. But if you want to take cohort-based learning to the next level, think about ideation sessions and collaboration, tools like Mural and Mira and Jamboard, which are actually being used in high schools today. That's how people are collaborating and ideating together. And that's what the future of the workforce is going to expect. These future workforce learners expect technology to guide the way. Next slide is, in short, nothing replaces collaboration and social interaction, whether it's built into a course, a cohort, or a gamification platform. Human connection and the learner must be at the center. Social learning is participating with others to make sense of new ideas, but what's new is how powerfully they work together. So on the next slide, I'll tap into high level. What's next for cohort-based and social learning is communities of practice. And this is what you can implement to take your cohorts to the next level. You'll see social and practice in action. You'll break down silos. You'll be able to solve problems as a collective, cultivate ideas, and even identify SMEs and mentors in that group. So I'm going to leave you all with a quote, one of my favorite quotes from the book by the Fearless Organization. If leaders want to unleash individual and collective talent, they must foster a psychologically safe climate where employees feel free to contribute ideas, share information, and report mistakes. Failing forward. Going forward, organizations should explore the link between psychological safety and high performance and create a culture where it's safe to express ideas, ask questions, and admit mistakes. And this, my friends, is the magic that I speak of. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brandy. Great start to our conversation for today. So next, let's take it to Jim, who again has done this quite a bit, and excited to hear about your experiences and how you approach social cohorts.
Thank you, Ike. I love, there's a word that you used. I'm hoping you can see me. Is my camera on? Okay, because I can only see you. That's okay.
You look great.
There's a word, Ike, that you used that you called collaboration. And Brandy, there's a word that you use that I absolutely love called it's actually technically two words, psychological safety. Those are two words that really kind of come close to my heart, and it really revolves and influences every single thing that I do here as a learning professional at Cornerstone. If you look at like dictionary after dictionary after dictionary, look up the word cohort, you'll see the standard words in those definitions every single time. You'll see a group that has a shared characteristic, a shared quality. But if you dig a little bit deeper and you look for more definitions, you'll see a definition that's called people, or it's stated as a cohort is one in which people are running in the same direction. And that really resonated with me, especially if you think about those words again, collaborate and psychological safety. For me, I feel like we have more tools than we've ever had before to do this right, especially virtually, but where people are feeling more isolated than ever, which is ironic, right? We have all the tools to be connected, but people are really dealing with some major feelings of isolation. And I think I'll tell a quick story. Sorry, I'm probably the only presenter without slides, but I'll tell a quick story. We live in a town called Claremont, California, and we moved to the beach called Hermosa Beach right when my daughter was turning 4 years old and my son was 2. And we moved to this town and we didn't know anybody, but we really liked the community. We liked the beach. We wanted to kind of dig in there. And so we decided to buy a house there. It closed right before school started. So not only is it all new for us, but the experience itself of going to school was new for my daughter. And my daughter was so shy at the time that when we'd be at a store and I'd push her in the cart, or she'd be walking next to me and someone would say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" She couldn't even look them in the eye. She was so shy. So again, getting back to those words of psychological safety and collaboration, right? So it comes the day, which is only like a week after we moved to the beach. We didn't know anybody. The day comes where we have to take my daughter to start this like pre-K school thing. And we started talking to her about it, and she's like bawling, she's crying. She doesn't want to go to school. And so we finally are able to get her out of the house into the car, and then we're able to get the car to school, and then we're able to get her out of the car to go to school. And we get to this classroom, and the teacher can see my daughter flipping out. I'm getting like chills talking about it. They can see my daughter flipping out, and my wife and I are like probably not doing much better. And the teacher says, "You know what, you two leave. I got this. You're probably making it worse." So my wife and I left the classroom feeling crappy, right? And we get back to our car, and I can remember like it was yesterday. We're sitting in the car, as a minivan, no judging. And we're sitting in our minivan, and we can look out the minivan, and we can see all the kids in the playground playing on the swing set, the little thing, whatever it's called, that goes around in circles, the jungle gym, all sorts of things. And all of a sudden the door opens from the classroom, and my daughter walks outside, again, 4 years old. And she's so shy. And she's standing there kind of looking down, arms crossed. I think the teacher said, "Go outside and play, you'll make some friends." And my daughter's just sitting there like this. And I'm in the car, and I started to cry. And I'm like, "Come on, Jordan, you can go make a friend. You can do this, you can do this, you can do this." And what seemed like an eternity passed, and probably it was all of 30 seconds, which is a point I'll come to later in talking about social cohorts. But a little girl walked over, and they grabbed my daughter's hand, and she walked her over into her pool of friends. And those became her friends. Those became her cohort for the rest of her time at that school. And whenever I think of social cohorts, I think of, how confident are you as you're putting this cohort together, or you have this cohort going through together, or whatever it is that they're going through. How confident are you that there's not one person in that cohort that didn't feel like my daughter felt? And that for me is psychological safety. One more thing before I get to what we do here at Cornerstone real quick about cohorts is, I have a son. I should make a story up about him too, but this is another daughter story. We're walking in every Christmas time. We take this daddy-daughter trip to a different city and drivable city within California. So the very first time we did this, we went to San Francisco. And we're walking up to the Golden Gate Bridge from where we parked at this park in this parking lot. And it's super foggy in San Francisco that day. And we can't see the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm like, it should be right here. It's huge. It should be in front of us. And we're walking around the corner, and all I see is the things coming into my sight are these big cables coming away from the bridge. And as I got closer to the cables, I realized it's not just one big humongous cable. It's thousands of little tiny cables made into one cable that's wrapped around a bunch of other cables. And it also got me thinking about cohorts. And the power of cohorts is that if they're really put together in a way that works, they'll set themselves up for kind of supporting each other, right? It's like if I don't have a pencil, but if I have a pencil here and I go to break it, it's easy to break that one pencil. Remember, people are feeling very isolated right now. So it's easy for me to break, I'm not going to break it. They can break this pencil. But if you think about those cables that were put together at the Golden Gate Bridge, if I had a bunch of pencils, I can't break them. I feel like that's the power of cohorts. I'll end with what we do here at Cornerstone around cohorts. One of the programs that I put together here is a program called Managing at Cornerstone for people managers. And I won't get into the selection process. I might talk about the selection process if a question comes up around it in the Q&A, but we get this cohort together, and we basically, this is first time people managers that are either brand new to Cornerstone as a manager or brand new to managing period. And we put them through this Managing at Cornerstone class. It's all virtual. It's 6 virtual classes over 6 weeks. And it teaches them things like, how do you set the direction of your team? And how do you develop your strengths of your team and not not mitigate their weaknesses so much, right? How do you focus on the strengths that they have? How do you coach them? How do you check in? How do you give them feedback? How do you ask for feedback, right? All those baseline skills that managers have. The reason I say this is once that cohort's together for that first class, Managing at Cornerstone, then they get to go through part 2 and part 3. And then all of our leadership programs that we have here at Cornerstone, the same cohort goes through together. So they get this collaboration, they get this bond, they get this ability to kind of push back with each other, to kind of become learning buddies with each other, accountability partners with each other. So it's really a great program. I'll stop there because I think I'm at my time. Any questions, put them in the chat and I can answer them during the open Q&A.
There are a couple, and I have a few myself that I'm excited to
Sure.
pepper in with you on that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's now move over to Dr. Tony Bolden. Last but definitely not least, let's go through what you have to say, Tony.
Well, I guess I should move quickly so we can get to Jim and Brandy being able to answer those questions. I still kind of feel like imposter syndrome, like I'm in the wrong group here, but happy to be with everyone. And as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, I kind of sit in both worlds. So I've been in talent management for about 30 years, back when I had hair and no gray. And so I've over the past 12 years or so, it's been in the software space. So one of my lives is actually working with Jim and helping clients find the vehicle to help facilitate that people development, and learning. And then the other hat I wear as a part of my academic credentials, I gained by a doctorate in organizational leadership. I wrote a book on leadership, based on some of the competencies that I've seen across effective leaders over the years. And I'm able to merge both those worlds because I'm able to leverage the insight that I've learned in my travels and the research that I've done on leadership to help my clients do better at developing leaders within their organizations, and vice versa. The folks that I counsel individually or the workshops and whatnot that I facilitate, I'm able to kind of bring some of that real world experience that I see from my software clients. Ultimately, and I think what we're hearing here, and Brandy just did a really great job of setting the stage, and Jim really I'm kind of going where Jim was and kind of putting a little bit of meat on the bones from a theoretical perspective of what we all think about social learning and cohorts and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we all believe in the power of connection. That's really what it boils down to. And to me, and Jim alluded to it with those stories and really resonated with me, is that learning really is that vehicle that helps us facilitate that connection, gives us something to connect about, and encourages us to stay connected. And so if we go to the next slide there, I consider myself like an evangelist, right? So that's what I call myself. I'm a principal and I'm a chief evangelist. So I advocate for authentic connections with my clients, right? I talk to them about, particularly leaders, how important it is to be authentic, to be collaborative, to be visionary and whatnot, but to be human, to connect with the people that you lead, because leadership is simply just guiding. That's all it is. And leaders have to get things done through other people. That's truly effective leadership. And so we can't really expect anyone to participate in a task or assign a task, almost from a compliance perspective, for someone to complete or to do or to finish without really giving them the opportunity to demonstrate proficiency in that task, their understanding and the acceptance of that information that they've learned, to give them an opportunity to kind of walk it out. And that's what cohorts allow us to do. And Jim kind of stole my thunder here about what a cohort is. And, it's not the first time, Jim. And it looks like you're broadcasting from a pumpkin, by the way, just to kind of level set here. But this is really what a cohort is. And the research that we've done that I shared about, junior PhD students and senior PhD students kind of getting together in cohorts. I've lived that life, and it resonates so truly, because I actually found this in my research and talking with leaders is one of the things they benefited from was mentorship, formally or informally. And so those stats are real. That resonates with me, but that's all we are. We're just a group kind of moving in the same direction, trying to achieve something or get something in common. And it just really provides, we talked about psychological safety. Cohorts provide that space, right? We've all been through something. We've all experienced something, seen something, been to the same place. And those cohorts allow us to kind of process that, to grow from it. We've all often talked about how learning is social, and that's where the meat really happens within those learning opportunities. So I kind of take this through what I call my 3H philosophy. And it's mine. Don't try to take it, anybody out there. But I'm very simple. And Ike and I have gone back and forth on this for a while now. We've worked together in different settings. So Ike, I kind of like to break things down to the bottom shelf because that's how I process information, right? So I call it 3H because to me, anytime that I kind of go through something or I'm experiencing something, it has to process itself through me in order for it to get to the point where it really resonates with me. And it starts with the head. And so most of us, well, not most of us, all of us, kind of receive information head on. We see a learning content, and you can just kind of let them all go. Like, we don't have to keep folks in suspense here. I know it's dramatic, but it happens when we're first exposed to something, right? We get in that training course. We start that onboarding. We're presented with that information. So it kind of goes in here. Then it kind of goes from the head to the heart. And to me, it's kind of that highway of, okay, I've received this information. I'm going to kind of measure it against what I believe to be true, my own experiences, the prejudices or biases, or just whatever perceptions that I bring to finding that information, and I kind of process it. And this is where cohorts really come into play, because we've all seen something, but this kind of heart process allows us to kind of figure out, hey, did I see what you saw? Well, when I was growing up, we thought of it this way. What do you think? And so the social learning, those networks, those cohorts allow us to kind of synthesize and kind of chew on that information a little bit. Then to me, it's like, okay, once I get it, then it moves to the hands. And now that I've seen this information, I've processed it, I've weighted against what I believe to be true, I've been corrected, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as I like to say, this is where you kind of put your hands to the plow and till the soil. And this is where cohorts really come into play, because now we've processed this information. Now we're in communities of practice, as you learning folks like to say. This is the cohorts allow us to kind of walk it out. And so it goes through, and it may be a 30-second process. When I'm doing workshops, folks say, well, how long does it take you to kind of get through the 3 H's? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, it kind of just depends on the individual. I do enough now where it may take a week, it may take 30 seconds, but it really does speak to me about the strength of, if we really want people to get what we're trying to get them to get, right? Try that one out. If we want people to get what we're trying to get them to get, then we've got to put them in spaces and communities to be able to let that resonate, and to be able to let them demonstrate that they know it, and to lean upon one another if they don't, for assurances there. So that's my spiel.
Wonderful.
And that's how you get in contact with me. The book is on Amazon. I guess I should have said that initially. I mean, I'm still trying to pay a mortgage here. So
well, also for everyone's benefit, have the ability to connect with all the panelists, and as well with myself at the end here. But here's a little shout for Tony here. So thank you all three so much. As you all can tell, it's going to be really hard for me to drive a conversation because none of these panelists have anything to say. I'm being very sarcastic, of course, but please put in the Q&A any questions that have come up. There are a few questions that have already been submitted in the chat as well as in Q&A. I am watching both, so please don't hesitate. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing screen for just a moment so that we can get all of our faces here together and start to talk. So first, Brandy, I really enjoyed your section there, and I think that you did a great job, as both Jim and Tony have alluded to, in laying the foundation. And to dig in just a little bit even more fundamentally, you've talked a lot about the needs that people have especially on that social element. But let's talk about the realities from the other side as well. If somebody was in a coma for the last 3 years, what are the new realities that somebody constructing these programs have to navigate?
I think from my perspective, can you hear me okay, by the way?
You sound great.
Okay, great. I remember when I first started in learning and development many, many years ago, there were the rolling monitors, desk to desk with the CD-ROM with very bad animation and binders galore. We're saving so many trees right now. I would say those experiences, and I'm going to quote the Sonic 2 movie. If you guys don't have kids and haven't seen Sonic the Hedgehog Part 2, there's a part where Jim Carrey's character says that this is about as useful as a backstage pass to see Limp Bizkit. And I think that that's where all of our old tech lives. It's about as useful today as a backstage pass to see Limp Bizkit. I started my experience early on in this type of work with Apple. And in 2013, we were doing a virtual experience. We were moving all of their call centers virtual. And I got to learn what it was like. This was before it became a necessity, when it was almost like a nice to have, how it could be done well. And today with COVID, our social muscle stopped being flexed for quite a while. It's literally a muscle you have to flex, and our learning really became under siege. Our brains function differently. We're functioning under stress. We're functioning under different levels of grief. We're functioning under shorter work staff. And that's where being more empathetic is going to come into play. That vulnerable leader, that vulnerable learning architect who's able to dig into design thinking and empathizing with users and the learner experience so that they can create experiences that resonate with this new, I would say, even more digitally native than they were before audience. So yeah, pre-pandemic, we could roll that monitor around. We could, get the smelly markers that smelled like apples and oranges and think that these great things were going to come out of it. But nowadays we have to focus in the things that we have, that we can use, that we can leverage, the virtual tools that we have, as well as the tools that can reach out to our learners after the fact, like drip style learning, text messages, never let them go. As soon as they walk out of the room or out of the virtual classroom, you have to continually reach back out to ensure that knowledge resonates. And there's different tools out there that allow you to do that. So that's my long answer to that question is we can't go back. There is no go back. We have to go forward and we have to be curious about what's next for learners and what they need and build our experiences to match.
Wonderful. So Jim, I think Brandy ended on a really good note to dig in on, especially with some of the questions that came about how you talked about how you do manager effectiveness and leadership training at Cornerstone. So first of all, if you don't mind, I know you did it in chat, but if you don't mind giving just a brief overview of what that is, and if you don't mind also talking about why you combined different elements together and how your thinking maybe helps to improve those social cohorts by using a variety of technology.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, if anybody's not familiar with what Cornerstone does for a living, right, we have some tools, right? So we have, we used to call the system dog food. So we eat our own dog food, which means I'm like a kid in a candy store, right? I have gazillions of hours of original content that I love to use. And we have all the resources to actually go and actually do this in a social manner. So to answer your question, everybody learns differently, right? Even though they're put together purposefully with, I'm going to put these groups together because they'll work best because of whatever the scenario is, everyone learns differently. So the purpose of, we'll take the one I mentioned before, right? Well, how do I deliver a social cohort around, let's take managing our Cornerstone. I happen to have a program and lots of good content around that. So people can go in and they're learning that. But a facilitator is teaching a little bit of it. They're giving them a little bit of best practices, and then they're solidifying those best practices around self-led learning. So we're sending out videos, we're sending out surveys, we're giving them homework to go do until we get together a week from now to get back into the class again for 90 more minutes. The beauty of that is I have a group starting tomorrow with the 16 brand new managers. Each of those 16 are paired up with what we call an accountability buddy or a learning buddy, where the two of them, now they're kind of stuck together. They're tethered together for life. So they're going to be going through the learning together. I teach a little bit. I put them in a breakout room. They go role play what I taught them. They come back. I teach them a little more. They go into a breakout room and they role play what I taught them. So when they're going and they're doing that, or they're leaving and they're going and trying some of this stuff that I'm teaching them on their teams, I'm having them every single week meet with their accountability or learning buddy to go and practice with them before they go to their teams and actually roll it out. So it really is good to have somebody to do that with. But one of the questions was, how do we do this if we don't have a program? There's lots of ways we've used cohorts at Cornerstone, right? When we went through a major acquisition a couple of years ago, we put together little mini cohorts where we said, let's get like-minded folks together. We did it by function because we didn't know a lot of the other groups of the company that we were bringing into our own culture. So we brought these cohorts together and brought them together for no other reason than to just listen to each other, to hear their concerns. If you think about change management, when somebody is going through something that's major, they're not really, how do I say this? More bad is derived from what is not said versus what is said. So it's something beautiful happens when you can put a cohort of people together, all from a similar function, because they have to work together going forward day by day, but you just let them voice their concerns. And the beauty of somebody saying, oh, Ike, you have that concern too. I didn't know you had that concern. I'm not the only one on the planet that has that concern. Probably everybody has the concern. That's the beauty of a cohort. No program, nothing on the agenda except how are you doing? And then you'd be amazed what happens from there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It does.
Okay.
Anything, Tony or Brandy, that you would either differ from in how you think about cohorts, or double down on from how Jim's described how he goes about combining different channels, different technologies, and optimizing those social groups?
I'll double down really quickly just because I was literally going there. It's more than just the atmosphere of learning, right? And I know COVID exposed a lot of things. I've been saying this now at all the workshops. I've been facilitating it for the last few months. I'm back outside now, so I just, I'm in front of people, have a lot to say. But COVID really exposed a lot of things when it comes to creating these kinds of connections, learning, and so much more. We've heard that is beat over the head. But one of the things that it really taught us was that when we can, and like you've heard me say this before, it made us take off the mask. And in doing so, it forced us, for those who were really willing to, and we were all at a point where I just want to talk to folks. I want to see folks. I want to interact with folks, even on a virtual platform. It allowed us to become our authentic selves. We gained an interesting perspective from one another. And it for me, at least, gave more of a desire to collaborate more in that authentic, non-formal, stoic way. And culture used to be about the environment for learning, right? Do we have a foosball table? Do we have bean bags? Do we have free coffee? And now it really just becomes about cultivating those authentic connections in any space that we find ourselves. And what really resonated with me with Jim is that, and even with you, I do remember, are the employees resource groups. These are groups of folks who identify in a particular area as well as allies, and just coming together in that space where we've all got some investment in it, and natural conversation flowing, learning outcomes achieved, et cetera. So it's really not about, let's continue to, now that we're kind of going back into the office, and this is what I'm telling leaders, do not get back into that, okay, now we're going to go back to the open pod structure. And now, hey, remember, the free candy and all this other stuff, which is fine. I mean, I love coffee and candy. Let's not get it wrong.
What are you talking about? Don't get rid of the free candy.
Right. Keep the candy, but remember where we came from. And bring our experiences from COVID and the way that we had to be flexible, the way that we had to kind of adapt and learn where we were. Bring that same mentality, even if it's back into the office, but still encourage those meetups, as I like to call them, whether they're virtually or in person. Encourage that blended learning of, I'm going to present some information in this virtual forum. We're going to get together if we can and talk about it, or we're going to get together virtually. Someone asked about tools. Obviously, I sell tools, but Zoom has proven to be, or Google Meets or Teams or whatever you're using. It's been just a great platform because it just allows you to just be in a real space with someone wherever they are and communicate in real time. even if you just kind of break it down to one medium that allows you to talk across platforms and see one another. I've seen enough baseball caps and cats and kids all these last couple of years to where it's like, we're just going to get to the meat here because we're all in the same space.
Excellent. I think I saw you come off mute for a second, Brandy.
Oh no, Tony was flowing there. I was like,
So maybe let's tee up to the next one that is related to this. There's a great chat going on, and Chantel made a very insightful call out, but then also asked a really good question, which is just about measurement in all of this. And so part of that is that technology conversation. Part of it obviously flows outside of that technology conversation. And I think part of that also is that the role of L&D is shifting right now, period. There is a space for learning in more places in the organizational initiative than has ever existed before. I think employee resource groups, Tony calls out to that with DEIB. So that's a big question, Brandy, and I'm interested to hear though what your initial thoughts are. Does traditional metrics work, or do we have to think creatively in measuring impact here?
we absolutely need to think differently. Everything that we do now should be different. That is where the magic is. That's where you're going to get a different impact. And it's looking at your metrics in a different way. So if you're trying to look at social learning and you're trying to get the same thing that you got from web-based training, you can forget about it, right? You have to figure out what it is you want to be the end result of it. And then that's what you measure. So that's why you guys hear me mention, start with the end in mind. If your end result is, you know, an uptick in collaboration and better relationships, and or is your end result clicks? Do you want to see how many times they click on a podcast or a resource document? So really sitting down and having an intentional conversation about what it is you want the output to be, that's going to give you a better measurement strategy. That's going to drive the type of tools that you use. That's going to drive the types of conversations that you have. Because if you don't know what you want to get out of it, you're just going to start off planning for something and not being able to pull out what you need. So, you know, if you want to count clicks, you have to pick a tool that can count clicks. You know what I mean? If you want to count engagement or relationships or how many friends a person has, then you need to pick a more social tool that shows social interactions, and you can get measurement from that. But that's really how it is. You're going to have to be very thoughtful, and it's something called measurement mapping that is out there now that really ties into all of those things and helps bring it full circle and gives you a holistic way to approach measurement versus just, did somebody complete a training or didn't they complete training?
I feel another webinar coming.
Well, just real quick, I want to jump on Brandy's point, and then I'll be quiet, I promise, because this is the conversation that I'm having in workshops as well. And I kind of put my researcher hat on, and what Brandy was basically saying, it's like I'm teaching or telling leaders to kind of get from the operational mindset of how to measure this kind of training, particularly now, right? The model's a bit broken. So I kind of rely on something that I learned in research many years ago, and I've used it, is this difference between correlation and causation. A lot of leaders like to think operationally there's causation, right? If I flip this light switch on, the light comes on. It was a direct cause. Where lots of times we kind of have to think of it from a nuanced perspective with this, a correlation. Correlation is a bit more gray. It allows you a little bit more flexibility. And correlation just simply says, are there enough things present in this activity that could reasonably be pointed to the success or the failure of something in this activity? So it's not, I flipped the light switch on, the light came on. Is it, you know, are we making sure that everything's connected? Do we have the right, and in this case, from learning in cohorts and social construct, do we have the right people in the room? Are we asking the right questions? Are we giving them time to kind of unpack this information on their own? So we're just trying to create at least enough of an atmosphere where I'm not going to be able to say, if you do this, then profits are going to shoot up by 30%. I will say there's a likelihood that if we can do this, and engage our folks in this way, we have a better chance of retaining them, of putting them into Jim's pipeline of leadership development than not. And so that's why I tell folks, be mindful, you know, don't just get stuck on this. Okay, we're back. Let's go back to black and white correlation or causation. So.
Amazing. Jim, another set of questions have come in, and I apologize that we will not get to all of them, but this has been very helpful. So one is how do you scale with limited resources? And the other that I think is related to that is how do you think about cohorts when you don't have people starting at the same time? Do you ever have a situation which you have a little bit of a staggered entry, and how do you deal with that? Both, of course, these being interrelated.
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of go back to what both Brandy and Tony said, which is think about what you want. To start with the end in mind, think about what you want. If the goal is to baseline a certain skill set, right? If you want every single person that's at this job level in this job function has to be able to do these 7 skill sets that are tied up to these 3 competencies, then it's just a baseline. It doesn't matter if they've been here a day or a year, you're just going to get everybody through whatever they need to get through to get those skills baselined, right? If it's not, then it's a little bit more like Tony mentioned about correlation, right? Is you have I've had cohorts together with leaders and their teams in the same cohort teaching management training, teaching leadership skills. And do I pair them together in the breakouts to go practice giving feedback to each other? No, but they happen to be open enough and invested enough in each other's growth that it works. Certain leaders, I would never put them in a room with their teams because I know it wouldn't work. So it just depends on what they're hoping to get out of it, for sure. The other thing is I might give a second of my time back to Tony to talk about what we do. He talked about ERGs, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't mention that. Any company can do that. They're called employee resource groups that Tony's involved with here at Cornerstone. And I think it's a great opportunity to put people in similar cohorts to give them this bigger voice, right? And it's wonderful. Tony, can you just speak a little bit more about what we do here around ERGs?
Sure,
I
absolutely.
think it speaks to that same question. Yeah. What
they
came up, we don't have any programs,
They came along at the right time, and it's really just an opportunity to say, okay, we have employees across and Cornerstone being a global organization, we've got employees across the globe that identify in many, many different ways. And what really stood out to me is that Cornerstone's commitment, and anyone who wants to do this and really cares about, again, making those authentic connections, et cetera, you have to develop the mantra that every face needs to be seen and every voice needs to be heard. That's it. That is the foundational tenet of an employee resource group. Now, Cornerstone, we call them Cornerstone Resource Group because why not? But it really just gives these folks an opportunity to say, hey, this is a safe space. It's not segregation. It's really a safe space of these are folks that are like you, that share your same interests, that you can collaborate with. And here's what's even better. Our CRG groups are open up to allies. So I'm in 6 or 7 different CRG groups. Clearly, I don't identify in some of them, but because your concerns are my concerns. And the allies within these groups also understand that I'm in this group for support. I'm not in this group to take over. And this is a whole nother webinar for a whole nother day. But what we've seen over the last 2 years is just the collaboration that comes forth, not only from the employees within the CRGs as they are pillars, but across CRGs. Ike and I did a lot of work together across. Ike was an ally in my CRG. I'm an ally in his CRG. And we've done a lot of cross-collaborative work within those groups where learning just took place. And we were cannibalizing, if you will, the learning and consuming the learning and demonstrating the learning almost, I don't want to say subconsciously, but non-purposely through our activities in those CRGs. So I think it really speaks to the power of community. It really speaks to the power of, like I said, every voice is heard, every face is seen, everybody matters. And so, that's, again, I can't maybe another webinar, but there's power in employee resource groups. And if you're not doing that, do it and see how your social learning and your cohort community-based interaction and engagement just soars.
If you don't mind me adding to that.
Please.
Because the ERG conversation is huge, but it was something you mentioned, Tony, and I just kind of wanted to pivot from it just a little bit, is that you mentioned you're in a group with people who are like you. And I think that is honestly sometimes the opposite of what we want in some of these cohorts, right? Like we want to be in groups with people that are like each other, but also different. That diversity that a lot of these conversations drive, and that richness that you'll get from a cohort, from a ERG group that has a combination of both people who are in that status as well as their allies. And honestly, when you're in a group of people who you think you're alike, you start realizing just how complex and different people are at different levels. So I just wanted to add that other component to it, is that it's a little bit more than just being around people who are like you. It's getting down into what makes people people.
Yeah.
Right.
What happens at the social level, and that's what happens at the human level, is
Yeah.
how are we alike, but how can I learn from you? And what do you have that I want that we can lean into each other and learn and grow together?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been very good. I can't believe that we're already at the top of our time, but I've learned so much today, and we have your questions. If we didn't get to any of those, we will follow up certainly. So please connect. As you can tell, all of our panelists today are very friendly and are willing to connect with other practitioners in the space. So please don't hesitate to reach out. As a secondary note, as you can tell, we have so much to talk about, and we will be facilitating more webinars in the future. If you have interest in being a thought leader with us, we are more than open to that invitation to you. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn, drop a note in your connection message to me, and we would love to get you facilitating or on a panel or something in another webinar. So with that, we also wanted to let you know again that we will be providing the PDF of the presentation and the link to the recording within 24 hours. We will be promoting other webinars, content like this. We have some ebooks that also talk about social learning, especially in the digital world, that we would encourage you to check out. And finally, I know some of you were anticipating a product demo, which we apologize there that this is purely just thought leadership, but we will be talking about and giving a demo about our product on April 21st for a peek inside of our product. We'll be talking about facilitating active development through virtual spaces, as well as touching on how to scale facilitator effectiveness and also driving forward learning with effective measurement and metrics, which we talked about a lot today. And I have a feeling of another webinar coming shortly. Brandy, you're going to have to come back and talk about that mapping tool, which will be really cool to dig into. But again, thank you all so much for coming to participate with us today. Thank you to our three panelists. You have been terrific. I learned so much today, as well as I believe our attendees did as well. And please, again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have additional questions or if we can be of any help to you. Thank you all.